everyone and welcome back to the Gentle Dog Trainers channel. I'm your host Olivia De Santos and today we are talking about homemade dog food. So in the previous two videos we talked about a raw dog food diet and there is an element of homemadeness there, but this time we're talking about cooked homemade dog food. How does it work? What are the pros and cons? How do you transition your dog from dry dog food to homemade dog food? And we'll share a recipe at the end. But before we begin, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. If you want to raise happy, healthy and well-behaved dogs, we upload videos every single week on new topics to do with dog food, dog gear and dog training. Please do click that little notification bell as well so that you never miss an upload. Now, let's talk about homemade dog food. The very first thing to note is that any recipe, including the one that I give you today, needs to be checked by your particular vet or a vet nutritionist. The thing is, when it comes to your dog's diet, particularly if you're making food at home, there is a huge margin of error because of your dog's weight, their age, their size, their breed, all of those factors, their activity levels, all of those factors go into what your specific dog needs for their own nutrition. This is doubly important if your dog is young or if they have any health conditions. We'll talk about homemade puppy food in the next video, but this video we're going to concentrate on adults specifically. There's still a huge margin of error here, so if you do want to start making your dog's food at home, then please do consult your vet first. So why do people make dog food at home anyway? Are there any specific benefits that outweigh the commercial stuff? Well, yes and no. Let's talk about the pros and cons. The first pro is transparency. So because you are making your dog's food at home, you know exactly what is going into that food. You can avoid any nasty fillers or sulfites that can cause a huge amount of damage to your dog. You can make sure that you get the highest quality protein, which we said is super important. If you look back to our video, somewhere linked in the iCard, about how to buy the right dog food for your dog, we talk about the nutritional content of the label. Whereas if you're making food at home, then you are making the label. You are the person that controls exactly what goes into that food. And it means that you can also change things with regards to your dog's specific sensibilities and specific nutritional needs. Another pro of homemade dog food is that you learn a lot about your dog. If you're a bit nerdy about dogs like I am, then it's super fascinating to make food for your dog yourself, because then you're learning about what their nutritional needs are on a very granular scientific level. As any dog enthusiast knows, it's just an opportunity to be even more nerdy than you were before. The third pro is that it can be cheaper. Now this has a huge asterisk attached to it because it completely depends on where you are in the world and what resources you have access to. But some people do report that when they switch from commercial food to homemade dog food, that it can be cheaper. Now for the cons. Homemade dog food is extremely easy to get wrong because dog nutrition is so individualized to a degree because of your dog's age and breed and their own sensitivities to food, etc. You can get this balance wrong. In fact, the reason that many vets might disagree when it comes to homemade dog food and raw dog food, that it's really easy to make food that doesn't have the right nutritional content for your dog. Over the long term of feeding them the wrong types of food or feeding them the wrong balances of food, they might not be getting the nutrients that they really need. And that means that you'll have to add in more supplementation so that your dog actually gets everything that they need from the food. Another con of homemade dog food is that it's not recommended for certain specific health conditions. As we mentioned in our raw dog food video, which I'll link above and in the description box down below, it can be quite dangerous for certain dogs to have a really high protein diet. So for example, if your dog has a kidney failure or liver failure or is susceptible to those, then a high protein diet is going to be quite dangerous for them. You also have to be very careful as to what whole food additions you can add to your dog's meal and that they will even enjoy. And the third and final con of homemade dog food is that it's way more work. It's way more work, and that is a huge con to me. As you'll see in the recipe a little later, it is a lot of effort to make your own homemade dog food. Even though the recipe might be relatively simple, having to do this every single day or every single week if you make it in advance, as well as making your own food at night and your kids' food, etc., it can add up. That is quite a lot of workload that you don't have when it comes to commercially available food. Next, let's talk about transitioning. So the first thing when it comes to transitioning your dog from the commercially available food to a homemade dog food diet is to consult your vet. Talk to your vet about whether it is even possible for your dog or advised for your dog to go onto homemade dog food, and ask for their best advice on what that dog food should include. Of course, in the recipe that we'll go through later, I'll also talk about the different ratios of food that you need to think about and what can be included in your homemade dog food, but it's really, really, really important that you speak to your vet first. The next thing to remember is that transitioning your dog's diet in any way, whether it's a raw dog food or homemade dog food, needs to be done slowly. You need to introduce a new diet over time. Now, the tricky thing to remember here is the caloric intake for your dog. And in our previous video, how much should your dog be eating each day, which we will link in the iCards and the description box down below, I give you a guide as to the caloric intake that your dog should have considering their specific weight. So make sure that when you are changing the ratios slowly from dry dog food to homemade dog food, that caloric intake is not exceeded. Just make sure that you are still within the daily recommended calorie intake when you are switching from dry dog food to homemade dog food. Pay really close attention to what your dog is actually eating when it comes to your homemade dog food diet as well. So if you're noticing that your dog is just preferring to eat the dry dog food and is mostly leaving some of the homemade dog food additions behind, then it might not be a good move for your dog. For example, if you're making a homemade dog food meal that has a base of chicken. If you notice that they eat the kibble, they eat the chicken, but they leave behind the rice and the whole food additions like the vegetables and the fruits that you have in, then a homemade dog food diet is not really going to work for your dog because they need all of that nutrition that's in the vegetables and the fruits for a homemade dog food diet to work. They can't just have protein. They also need all of the vitamins and minerals that are in the other parts of the food, including any supplementation that you've added. So make sure that when you are transitioning, that all of that food is being eaten. Okay, so we've talked about the pros and the cons. We've talked about how to transition. Let's go over to my kitchen and I will show you a basic homemade dog food recipe. Now, before you try this at home, as I say, please, please, please do consult your vet first and make sure that you get a sign off from them. Let's head over.
Alright, so first things first, here are the main components of homemade dog food. Protein will always be the largest component of any meal that you should make. And here are some good protein inclusions, so chicken, turkey, ground beef, You also need a good amount of fatty acids, so this could be animal fats as well as plant seed oils like canola oil, for example. Carbohydrates like rice, pasta, quinoa and oatmeal are also good inclusions. And then you've got fibrous greens, so carrots, dark leafy greens, apples, flax seeds. Those are great additions to homemade dog food. And then any supplementation, just to make sure that your dog really gets all of the vitamins and minerals that they need. You don't need all of these things, but a good amount. It's also important to note that I used a website called Balance It to come up with this recipe. So with the ingredients that I had, I popped it into the website so that it would give me accurate ratios of the meat content and the vegetable content. You need to do this for the ingredients that you have, and the ingredients that you can use are really vast. So please do your research. This is just one potential recipe. Okay, so this is a pan with a little bit of bacon fat in it. And also I'm going to add in the ground beef and chicken liver. These are going to be my protein inclusions, and this is going to be the largest percentage of the homemade dog food. And then I'm going to add in some whole food additions. So I'm using spinach. This is a handful of spinach that's been roughly chopped and will reduce down really nicely if you give it a good stir. Spinach is a great source of fiber that I want to add into the meal. And then I'm going to add in half a red pepper and the shavings of 1 carrot. So you'll want to allow this to cool completely before you give it to your dog. So I'm going to put it in the bowl and leave it to cool. And I'm also going to add in 2 chicken necks just for some extra nutrients and a bit of a tasty treat. And I'm also going to add in some chicken skin, which is a bit of animal fat, to add to my balance. So this
I hope that you enjoyed this video about homemade dog food. If you liked it, then you will really like this video. I've been Olivia DeSantos for Gentle Dog Trainers, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.